Good morning. Today, man, have you ever had one of those? It wasn't a fun wake up, workout kind of thing. Just in one of those, I'm not sure I'm going to be productive kind of days. Um, Rather than fight it, I'm going to spend it in prayer and kind of do what I can to dig into this space that we're in right now. And sometimes that just means being where you are. So today, my go to when I don't really know where to go in Scripture is the book of Proverbs. Uh, and Proverbs is a series of wisdom sayings throughout, or that come from, or that are attributed to King David and King Solomon. But we also, most likely, there are many different authors of these passages, and so there's some really strong consistency in the first couple of probably 5, 6, 7 chapters, and then it kind of turns into a listing of sayings. And one of the things that has been driving me nuts lately seems to be this idea of foolishness and how everyone's angry and how everyone's frustrated, and then you go out and some people seem to care, some people don't seem to care about what's going on, um, and then you see this influx of ranting and frustration on Facebook, and instead of um, trying to learn from this, I have been more getting angry and frustrated with it, and then trying to distance myself from it. So returning back to Proverbs, there's some wonderful stuff here about wisdom, about trying to find peace, and then really about like how do you, I don't know, for me, how do you live in the midst of this time? So I'm going to read from Proverbs 14, 1 through 8. A wise woman builds her house, while a foolish woman tears hers down with her own hands. Those who walk with integrity fear the Lord, but those who take a crooked path despise him. Pride spouts in the mouth of a fool, but the lips of the wise protect them. When there are no oxen, the stall is clean, but when there is a strong bull, there is abundant produce. A truthful witness doesn't lie, but false witness spews lies. A mocker searches for wisdom and gets none, but knowledge comes quickly to the intelligent. Stay away from fools, for you won't learn wise speech there. By their wisdom, the prudent understand their way, but stupidity of fools deceives them. Um, this is one of those where I don't want us to be thinking about like judging others, and now we can say, oh, well, they're idiots, so we can ignore them. That's or fools are in the midst of this. This passage, the reason I brought it up today was to remind myself, and maybe you need this reminder too, that there's not that intentional moment where you being mad at someone for their foolishness and then telling them how foolish they are is going to make anything better. There's other passages throughout Proverbs that talk about putting wisdom before people who are being ignorant. Good morning, Peggy. That putting wisdom before people who are intentionally ignorant or who are foolish is doing anything but bringing frustration to you. Our youth minister Ed has shared a quote, and I can't remember who it's from, a couple of different times. He says, essentially, when you argue with a fool, you go down to their level and they beat you with experience. That just always makes me laugh, and it also feels right. That when we're talking about wisdom, when we're talking about the right steps forward right now, to those who are unwilling to see, who see it differently. I don't know. And this is the other part, like, who is the fool? All of us at some point. But if someone's unwilling to see wisdom, then there's no point of you laying that before you. And then, to me, then there's this space of like, so then what do I do? What can I do? And I get into that space. Thanks, Sandy. I get into this space where I want to tell everyone how dumb they're being. Anyone else there? Do you know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we find the passive-aggressive way with the meme that seems funny to us but would sting to someone who disagrees with us. Sometimes we make a posting about a family member or friend, but we didn't use their name because they'll never figure that out. There's so many different ways that we can use passive aggressiveness to try and feel like we're putting our wisdom or tossing our wisdom in someone else's face. The reality is all we have to operate with is our own choices and our own heart and our own soul. And so when we think about what it means to find wisdom, when we think about this passage, this is not a passage that should be used to go out and point out and say, oh, great, now I've pointed out this Proverbs, so you're the fool, to whoever do you disagree with. The point of this is these are some indicators of wisdom. And so it honestly, as you're looking at it, this is one of those things where you should be going, am I doing some of these things? Am I being a fool? Even if we're so sure that we're wise and that we're following Jesus, always this should be our question. If we are not looking at our souls, if we are not looking at our own words, our own things, no matter how sure we are, no matter how righteous we may feel internally, if we are not checking ourselves, then we might be walking this foolish path like so many have before us. And if we're honest, like we have too in the past. Or sometimes the past means the hour before where we lost our cool when we know we should have held it. When instead of taking a break, we decided to press on and then couldn't figure out why we didn't have patience for the people we love or care for. There's so many different things there. Yesterday, man, I ended the day grumpy as all get up. Just in the afternoon, all I wanted was some time to have a simple conversation with my wife. And we've got 4 kids, if you didn't know that. And so we put the kids to bed, and I was like, great, this is the time where we're going to be able to discuss something. And so we went down to the basement after putting the little kids to bed. And our oldest followed us down there and had a question for us, and that drove me crazy. And then not even before we came all the way up the stairs, one of the other kids had something they needed. And I responded foolishly. But I was out of energy. I was out of patience, definitely. And that doesn't help. But when I went to sleep, I found myself a bit more rested, although, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is still not a perfect place today. But my hope is that I can pursue God's wisdom here, because I've acted a fool at times. And I think that's what we're seeing when we dig into passages like this. When it talks about wisdom, when it talks about that we're all going to make mistakes, we're all going to fail. The difference between growing in wisdom and growing in foolishness is whether or not we are consistently seeking God's heart. And so when we make mistakes, we're willing to admit it. We're willing to say, I'm sorry. We're willing to, if need to, make amends. Go back and have a conversation, apologize for your shortness. There's a lot of that that's really strong there too. And to me, this is also a connection into how John Wesley talked about using reason as a way of experiencing God's life and love. And so I'm in the John Wesley Study Bible on page 8, Common English Version, on page 817, and there's a passage here. You can't read it, but I'm just going to kind of show you these nice little study blocks. And this one says, the Wesleyan core term, undervaluing of reason. It reads, several times the writer of Proverbs tells us to get wisdom. Throughout Scripture, we find passages in which the authors encourage us to use our reasoning capacities. Wisdom is sometimes described in terms of a thoughtful and reflective woman who draws upon her experience as she carefully considers how best to live in relation to God, others, and herself. Jesus and others of the Old Testament tell us to love God with our minds. But sometimes Christians think that reason is opposed to faith. John Wesley encountered people who valued emotional experiences over reason. To them, Wesley said that our reason is not opposed to faith, but helps us understand our faith. Reason is a gift from God. Developing our mental capacities is one way that we show gratitude for that gift. Essentially, if we want God's wisdom, we need to pursue that, and that means asking questions. That means studying Scripture. That means trying to dig into our own stuff, our own garbage, our own broken spaces, and see, is that somewhere in my life that I need help with? Is that where I need more wisdom? And sometimes it's more reading of Scripture that helps. Sometimes it's more prayer, more introspection, more rest. And other times, it's a professional counselor, it's a spiritual director, it's someone who can help us to see what we're not able to see by ourselves. The other part to that is I think Jesus gives us some great wisdom when he says, wherever 2 or more are gathered, there I am also. And this is to remind us that we can pray by ourselves all we want, but sometimes the greatest wisdom that we need comes when we're in a group, when there's others around us who know us and care for us, and they can see, they might be able to see something we're not seeing. So my invitation for you today is dig into Scripture. Once again, that was Proverbs 14 that I was reading. I have rewritten about half of this, and by that I mean when I was deployed, I had a journal where I rewrote passages from Proverbs that I liked, and in the end I basically rewrote the whole book in that passage. And it helped me over and over when I was frustrated with what was going on around me, and has continued to be a great pillar in my life. So if you ever need a little bit of peace, sometimes it's funny to look at the things that you're frustrated with in the book of Proverbs and see that this is a thousands-year issue, that we've had people who appear foolish or who are doing foolish things for thousands of years. And then that kind of accountability part, like the beginning of this book is all about a father trying to teach his children to understand wisdom. So it talks about receiving reproach and looking for correction, and how do you respond to all those things. Some incredible things on how to grow and be people of grace. And oddly enough, or not odd at all, it starts with us in what we're pursuing. You're not going to hit perfection right away. In fact, it's one of those things that John Wesley really kind of noticed, that people who were on their way to perfection or had reached what he considered perfection in this life were usually folks who were up there in the years, that had plenty of wisdom and plenty of years behind them. And on top of that, most of the time they did not believe that they had found perfection. It was something from the outside that I still need to question, I still wonder about myself. That was almost instrumental in them truly being as close to God as they could in this life. So I hope you find God's peace today. Hey, Sherry. And may you rest in the peace and power of God's love for you.